Good afternoon, dear friends. Today we will continue our topics concerning non-clinical diagnosis of adverse events, clinical pharmacovigilance, and one of the actual topic we will discuss its topic concerning teratogenic drugs. For our new colleagues, for our new participants, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Galina Cordero. I am qualified person pharmacovigilance, head of pharmacovigilance department, GCK Pharmac. I will be very thankful if you will find ability and subscribe my channel, and I will be very happy and very glad because this information can be useful for practical medical doctors, and it will help, I hope it will help for their daily practice. Concerning teratogenic drugs, we have now development of this science called teratology, and it has very tragic history of thalidomide. We will talk about in my lecture too. What about teratogenicity? It refers to capacity of drug to cause fetal abnormalities when administered to the pregnant mother. The placenta does not strictly constitute a barrier, and any drug can cross it to a greater or lesser extent. The embryo is one of the most dynamic biological systems, and in contrast to adults, drug effects are often irreversible. The thalidomide disaster, it was very big, I can say, very huge tragedy, started in 1958 to 61, resulting in thousands of babies born with phocomelia, C-like limbs, and other defects. Focused attention to this type of adverse effects. Approximately, concerning epidemiology of this problem, approximately 3 to 5% of live births are complicated by a birth defect each year, totaling around 120,000 babies. Drug use is an uncommon cause of birth defects, but certain medication can increase the likelihood of developing a birth defect. Additionally, more women taking any kind of medication has more than doubled in the last 30 years. Current evidence suggests that between 65 and 94% of women take at least one prescription drug during pregnancy. Nearly 70% of women are taking a medication in the first trimester during organogenesis. On average, women are taking 3 medications in pregnancy, with over 50% of women using 4 or more. This includes over-the-counter medication and herbal supplements. I can tell that this topic of teratogenicity, it first lecture of big module concerning drug safety in pregnancy, lactation, vaccine, and pregnancy. I hope you, my dear colleagues, have noticed paternal use and drugs. It's an important topic too, and you can find it in my YouTube channel. What I want to pay your attention, and I will talk it about and in a lecture concerning on drug in pregnancy women and drug in safety in children, because what we should remember that children not a young adult. Children have specific development and specific physiology development. We will talk about in a lecture. Concerning on this topic, what we should know that the main embryonic period and what defect can happen in, precisely in this period. For example, when we're talking about period in science embryology, I hope you remember it, is that period is divided in zygote, implantation, and bilaminar embryo, and you see that it's a stage on marula, embryonic disc, blastocyst, amnion, embryonic disc, and you see that during, for example, third to fifth, you see it in this picture on this slide. It's more often it can happen narrow tube defects, and it can continue and has some development on mental retardation, and then it can be problems and disorders in central nervous system. When we talking about TA, ICD and VCD, it's problems with development of heart and vessels. It can be problem with development of heart and klapan valve problems in hearts too. It can be included. Amelia meramelia upper limb. You see that amelia meramelia can go in problems with upper limb. Amelia meramelia in lower limb can be has some development in disorder. And cleft lip, upper lip, low set malformation ears and deafness can be problem with ears. You see that it's divided strict, precisely, definitely by periods. You see it. And for example, problems with microphthalmia, cataracts, glaucoma starting middle of first to 9 week can be problem with development of eyes. Concerning on animal hypoplasia in staining, its problem can have can have development with teeth, development of teeth in newborn babies, and self-palate and palate, self-palate and palate, and masculinization of female genitalia, external genitalia, and for example, what can be happen, many women has problem in pregnancy and have problem to lose baby, risk of lose baby, and they administrated, they have been administrated by medical doctors, gynecologists, dufaston drug, and it can be cause of masculinization of female genitalia and external genitalia. And concerning on negative effects on pregnancy and newborn baby, but without teratogenicity, we will talk in lecture. Drug safety in pregnant women. When we want to assume this knowledge, we can divide all phase according to this schedule. The picture pre-embryonic phase, it's day from 0 to 14 post-conception, blastocyst and cluster on differentiated cells, embryonic discs, and exposure to teratogen all of nothing. Weeks 3-8 post-conception, it's time of starting phase of organogenesis. Fourth week, greatest potential to cause cross malformation. Fetal phase, week 9 post-conception, birth, to birth, growth of structures and development of normal physiological function, general growth retardation or interfere with functional development within specific organ system. Teratogenic, it's huge strategy from our history. It was thalidomide and valproate. It's two huge tragedy with prescribing these drugs to pregnant women. And teratogenetic, it's a drug effect on the fetus, is determined largely by fetal age at exposure, drug potency, and drug dosage. Fetal age affects the type of drug effect. Before the 20th day after fertilization, drugs given in this time typically have an all or nothing effect, killing the embryo or not affecting it at all. Teratogenicity is unlikely during this stage. During organogenesis, between 20 and 56 days after fertilization, teratogenesis is most likely at this stage. It's a more dangerous stage, I can say. Drugs reaching the embryo during this stage may result in spontaneous abortion, a sublethal gross anatomic defect, true teratogenic effect, or covert embryopathy, a permanent subtle metabolic or functional defect that may manifest later in life. All these drugs may have no measurable effect. After organogenesis in the second, third trimesters, teratogenesis is unlikely, but drugs may alter growth and function on normally formed fetal organs and tissues. As placenta metabolism increases, doses must be higher for fetal toxicity to occur. It means what this mean teratogenic. Tera, a monster genesis produces. A teratogen is defined as any agent that results in structural or functional abnormalities, malformation in the fetus or in the child after birth as a consequence of maternal exposure and during pregnancy. Birth defects are known to occur in 3–5% of all newborns, and they can do direct damage to the fetus, causes abnormal development. History about teratogenicity, it has a long history. It started in 1988 from exposure to therapeutic radiation during pregnancy, and as a result were born a microcephaly baby. In 1933, deficiency of vitamin A in the first month before pregnancy, during pregnancy, anophthalmia, deficiency in eye. In 1941, German measles, rubella infection in pregnancy caused teratogenicity, blindness, deafness, mental retardation, and death. And it's very dangerous disease during pregnancy, and gynecologists, obstetrics give advice, and they give recommendation make abortion for pregnant women with German measles, rubella. In 1944, malformation due to nutritional deficiency and huge strategy today I paid attention on it starting from 1951 to 58 to 1961. Correlation between thalidomide used as sedative, hypnotic and antiemetic ingestion in pregnancy, and as a result were born children in pregnant women with very dangerous defects of extremities, focal, melia extremities. And what was happened from it? It was huge tragedy in European country, and because of personal position of hero women, this tragedy did not happen in United States. Initially prescribed to pregnant women and tranquilizer antiemetic for the morning sickness, never approved by the FDA. Teratogenic effect can be up to one single dose. As a result, 10,000 children worldwide are disabled because of thalidomide. In 1998, it was approved by FDA for erythema nodosus leprosum as a treatment, and teratogenic effects probably due with the anti-angiogenetic effect of the drug, now under investigation as anti-cancer, but it's prohibited and contraindicated in pregnant women. You see, and what problems was with thalidomide? Its insufficiencies in non-clinical trials, and pharmaceutical company should remember it. Pharmaceutical company pay attention on risk for pregnancy in non-clinical stage, and for example, it's not from teratogenicity but a reason of long interval QT prolongation by administrated fenspirit was a reason in stage of non-clinical trials, was a reason of withdrawal the drug of market because of present alternative too. When we're talking of thalidomide, what we pay attention that mechanism by which thalidomide modulates immune response and angiogenesis. It inhibits the release of tumor necrotic factor alpha, and it has deep clinical knowledge, pathology knowledge, pathophysiology knowledge. Which lessons we should remember from tragedy of thalidomide? The thalidomide tragedy taught us many lessons. The need for adequate testing of medicine prior to marketing, including non-clinical trial. The need for government regulation of medicines. The need for reporting system to identify the adverse effects of medicines. The potential safety implication of unproven marketing claims. Most medicine cross the placenta, and this result is fetal exposure and avoidance of unnecessary use of medicine in pregnancy, and that some risk can be successfully minimized with category, with including category, for example, pregnant women, children, in the safety profile of drug. When we're talking another problem, there are drugs Rocatan, and you see what kind of abnormality it can have. It's teratogenicity problems. It's the abnormalities, thymus gland abnormalities, parathyroid hormone deficiency, and cardiovascular abnormalities. This agent has several teratogenic effects: serious craniofacial, cardiovascular, thymic, and central nervous system malformation. Sometimes it can be cause of death. And you should remember the interference with normal development can be reason of abnormalities in neonate. You should remember drugs taken during pregnancy as a reason of teratogenicity, radiation, environmental pollutants, chemical hazards, workplace, and dietary deficiency. And you should remember that can be drug interaction with radiation, pollutants, environmental and chemical hazards, and dietary deficiency. It's not just drug, but it's increase in risk. It can be factor of risk, or for example, photosensibilization to on some drugs, and you should remember it can be risk and factor risk, which can have huge influence of neonate and it can cause of risk. Many mechanisms complex subcellular level only detectable as malformation, and most likely direct cytotoxic event, cell death and necrosis, leads to reduced proliferation, gives rise to malformation of growth of particular tissue. It means that teratogens are substances that may produce physical or functional defects in the human embryo of a fetus after the pregnant woman is exposed to the substance. Alcohol and cocaine are examples of such substances too, and you should remember about these risk factors as teratogens. Exposure, it's bad habits in pregnant women, and it can be reason of death, neonates, newborn kids. Exposure to the teratogen affects the fetus of embryo in a variety of ways, such as the duration of exposure, the amount of teratogenic substance, and the stage of development the embryo fetus is in during the exposure. They affect the embryo of fetus in a number of ways, causing physical malformation, problems in behavioral or emotional development of the child, and decreased intellectual quotients in the child, IQ. We remember these factors, and we should know principles of teratogenesis too. Its timing of exposure. Exposure to a teratogen in the first 3 months structural malformation, and exposure after the first 3 months growth defects. Principle of teratogenesis includes difference in susceptibility. Maternal and fetal susceptibility to a drug is different, and drug does not need to cross the placenta to affect the fetus. Genetic variation can be a reason of principles of teratogenesis. It can differ among individuals as a result of genetic variation in drug metabolism. Teratogenesis in human can be different teratogenic in animals because of difference of physiology, but again, non-clinical trials shows real pictures for example, you should suspect risks if in pregnant animals, mice, monkeys, dogs, can happen malformation after prescribing these drugs in non-clinical trials. Pharmacokinetic and metabolic difference between animals and humans has led to drug being falsely identified as a teratogenic in humans following animal tests. Dose-response relationship can be teratogenic effects dose-dependent. Dose-response curve is steep and depends on time of administration after consumption and the cumulative exposure rather than extent and rate of drug transfer across the placenta. Possible site of action of teratogen is direct toxic action fetus, metabolitis toxic, indirectly toxic antimetabolitis, antivitamin, pharmacodynamic actions or, for example, on cardiovascular system, on nervous system, endocrine balance altered, fetal-placental union, umbilical cord spasm, amniotic fluid volume change. In this way, fetal or maternal placental blood flow, placenta transferred, or this can be nutrient decreasing through placenta. Mother, nutritional changes, vitamin or mineral deficiencies, biochemical changes with secondary effects on the fetus, hyperglycemia, endocrine balance, and not forget and remember, please, role father in the birth of child. It can be reason sperm changes. If we talked about it, can be reason of abnormalities of child too. Possibility site of action of teratogenesis, indirect toxin action, cause of malformation, interfering with fetal metabolism, drug, for example, insufficient folic acid, drugs folic acid antagonist, or deficiency on folic acid can be reason of problem with development of nervous tube and sputum development. You should remember it. And folic acid antagonist, antiepileptic drugs can be a reason of problems development of nervous system in fetus. Teratogenic drugs, directly or indirectly, assuming this what I said before, directly or indirectly causes a structural or functional change in the fetus or child if it is administered to pregnant mother. If mother is taking these drugs, it can be either stopped, switched, or reduced to the lowest dose possible, typically during sensitive periods of fetal development and depending on the particular teratogenic process and target organs. The following criteria for teratogenic drugs. In 1994, Shepard suggested using the following: penetration through the placenta, a biologically acceptable explanation for the mechanism detecting teratogenic effects, the presence of a reliable temporal relationship between action and outcome, action and outcome, exposure of the drug in the critical period of intrauterine development, Specificity, since most teratogens produce a certain type of CDF. The similarity of results obtained at least in two or more higher quality pharmacoepidemiological research and experimental confirmation on animals. Dose-effect relations of teratogens. Teratogens may demonstrate a dose-effect relationship. At low doses they can no effect, and intermediate doses a characteristic pattern of malformation will result, and at higher doses the embryo will be killed. A dose response may consider an essential in establishing teratogenicity in animals, but its uncommonly demonstration insufficient data among humans, and threshold teratogenic dose is the dosage below, while the incidence of adverse effects is not statistically greater than that of control. With most agents, a dose threshold for teratogenic effects has not been determined. However, they are usually well below levels required to cause toxicity in adults. Teratogens must reach the development fetus in sufficient amounts to cause their effects. Large molecules with a molecular weight greater than 1000 do not easily cross the placenta into the embryonic fetal bloodstream to exert potential teratogenic effects. Other factors influencing the rate and extent of placental transfer of xenobiotics include polarity, lipid solubility, and existence of specific protein carrier. Example mechanism of teratogenesis. Before, in 1977, James Wilson proposed 6 principles of teratology that were subsequently published in the Handbook of Teratology, and the 6 principles he identified are: susceptibility to teratogenesis depends upon the genotype of the conception and how it interacts with environmental factors. Susceptibility to teratogenic agents varies with the development stage in the time of exposure. Teratogenic agents act in specific ways on developing cells and tissue to initiate abnormal embryogenesis. The final manifestation of abnormal development are death, malformation, growth retardation, and functional disorder. The excess of adverse environment influence to development tissues depends on the nature of the agent, and manifestation of deviant development increase in degree as the disease increase from the non-effect to the totally lethal effects. Cause and mechanism of teratogenous medicines. In 1910 publication by Van Gelder et al. Literature Review identifies 6 related with the use of medicine in the principal pile teratogenic mechanism, their role of which has become understood mainly through research on laboratory animals. Antagonism with folic acid, destruction of neural fault cells, endocrine disorders, oxidative stress, vascular disorders, and specific receptor of enzyme-mediated teratogenesis. Folate antagonism as a teratogenic mechanism. It can be inhibition of the folate methylation cycle. As example, many anti-epileptic drugs, metformin, methotrexate, sulfasalazine, triameptarine, neural crest cell disruption can be caused. Interference in molecular pathways involved in migration, differentiation, and proliferation of neural crest cells. It can be bosentan, isotretinoin, and ketoconazole. Endocrine disruption, sex hormones, affecting the release binding of metabolism of endogenous sex hormones, particularly in male development. Drugs used in fertility treatment, oral contraceptives, phthalates, and goatine. Oxidative stress mechanism can be cause of imbalance between generation of reactive oxygen species and antioxidant defense mechanism caused irreversible oxidation of DNA, proteins, and lipids and affected gene expression. As example, can be class 3 antiarrhythmic drugs, iron supplements, phenytoin, terbutaline, tetracyclines, thalidomide, and valproic acid. Vascular disruption as a teratogenic mechanism can be disturbance in blood circulation and the uterine placental unit, placental fetal unit of the fetal itself, interfering with the placental development of vasculature. And it can be, as example, antihypertensive medication, aspirin, ephedrine, and non-steroid inflammation drugs. Teratogenic mechanism, specific receptor of enzyme-mediated teratogenesis, ICA and its AT2 receptors in antihypertensive drugs. It can be a disruption of fetal renin-angiotensin system, producing fetal hypertension, vascular disruption, and decrease in fetal renal vascular tone. It can be ICA inhibitors or IT2 receptors inhibitors. HMG CoA reductase, downregulation of head-genok proteins, which regulate embryonic growth, patterning, and morphogenesis of many structures. It can be statins, histone deacylases, CDAs, and another mechanism can be interruption of cell proliferation, differentiation, and apoptosis, so dysregulation of gene expression but chromatin remodeling. It can be boric acid as an active ingredient, salicylates and valproic acid. Teratogenic mechanism cyclooxygenase. Inhibition of COX-1, which COX-1 catalyzes the conversion of arachidonic acid to prostaglandins. It can be steroid inflammation drugs, MDR receptors, arose and migration of neuronal and glial elements in developing brain. It can be amantadine, dextrometrapan, and ketamine. Fifth receptors and transporters as a mechanism increases stimulation of suppression of fifth reception, inhibition of fifth uptakes but fifth transporters. It can be risperidone, CCRIs drugs, sumatriptan, GABA receptors. Enhancement of the effects of GABA, GABA, the major inhibitor neurotransmitter. It can be barbiturates and benzodiazepines. And carbonic anhydrase reduction in embryonic intracellular, it can be acetazolamide and topiramate. What you should remember, what can be very dangerous for pregnant women, future mother in first trimester of pregnancy. It can be analgesic drugs, anticonvulsant drugs, anticoagulant drugs, antidepressant, antithyroid, vitamin A, metal toxic, sedative, hypnotic, and aminoglycosides as antibiotic. Proven human teratogens and abnormalities. Thalidomide as a drug can be cause for camellia multiplied effects, huge tragedy, you remember. Antineoplastic drugs multiply defects, fatal deaths. Androgens virilization, esophageal cardiac defects. Progestins virilization of female fetus. Stilbestrol vaginal carcinoma. Tetracyclines discolor teeth, bone defects. Warfarin nose, eyes, hand defects, growth retardation. Phenytoin cleft lip, palate, microcephaly, and hypoplastic abnormality. Alcohol, low IQ, growth retardation, fetal alcohol syndrome. IC inhibitors, hypoplasia of organs, growth retardation, fetal loss. Lithium, fetal goiter, cardiac abnormality. Indomethacin, premature close of ductus arteriosus. Isotretinoin, craniofacial heart and central nervous system defects. Antithyroid drugs, fetal goiters, hypothyroidism. Fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS, defined as the presence of the least of one characteristic from each of the following three categories: growth restriction before and or after birth. Fetal abnormalities can include small palpebral fissures in districts of absent phyltium, epicantic folds, platinate nasal bridge, short lengths of nose, thin upper lip, low set and unparalleled ears, and retarded midfacial development. Central nervous dysfunction can include microcephaly, mental retardation, abnormal neurobehavior development, attention deficit with hyperactivity. Analgesic aspirin, it can be hysteresis, decrease prostaglandin, decrease uterine contraction, delayed onset of labor, prolonged period of pregnancy. During delivery can be caused severe bleeding because aspirin decreased platelet aggregation. Anticonvulsants, fetal hydantoin syndrome, can be cause of this syndrome. It's craniofacial malformation, cleft lip and palate, broad nasal bridge, abnormal ears, congenital heart disease, limb malformation, and mental and growth retardation. Anticoagulant, warfarin, and drugs. It's fetal warfarin syndrome, nasal hypoplasia, bones and appear small, bone stippling, mental retardation, respiratory distress syndrome, and fetal and maternal hemorrhage. Vitamin A, retinoic acid, can be cause craniofacial dysmorphism, cleft palate facial malformation, thymic-aplasia, missing of organ, neural tube defects, birth defect of brain. Levothyroxine indication, steroidic hormone for treatment of hypothyroidism, can have risk factor, fetal risk, cross placenta in minimal amounts. Not available human data but suggested possible association with cardiovascular defects at higher doses. Lansoprazole indication, proton pump inhibitor, anti-secretory drug. Risk category, B fetal risk, not teratogenic in animals but may cause decreases fetal weight. In animals can be caused long-term higher doses are carcinogenic, and this effect you should remember too, because you can find cases of development of carcinogenic effects of stomach, cancer of stomach, and some scientists pay attention for relative presence of presence of relative with exactly precise cell proton pump inhibitors. No available data in human pregnancy, so it should be avoided. Tramadol indication. Centrally acting analgesic analog of codeine risk category. Fetal risk, not teratogenic in animals but fetotoxic at higher doses, caused decreased fetal weight, skeletal ossification, increased supernumerary and transient delay in development and behavior parameters, crosses human placenta. Human data is lacking, but when compared with meperidine for labor analgesia, fewer maternal side effects, and lower neonatal respiratory depression had been reported. Teratogenicity of isotretinoin. Features: external can be abnormalities, ears, anatonia, micropenia, small absent external auditory canal, eyes, microphthalmia, facial dysmorphism, cleft palate, internal abnormalities, central nervous system, cerebral abnormalities, cerebellar malformation, hydrocephalus, microcephaly, cranial nerve deficit, cardiovascular system, thymus gland abnormalities, parathyroid hormone deficiency, suboptimal IQ, spontaneous abortion, and premature birth. If we're talking about teratogenicity of isotretinoin. Metal toxins, lithium, can be cause of hypotonia, cyanosis, lethargy, and poor respiratory. Diazepam, cleft lip and palate, inguinal hernia, congenital heart disease, pyloric stenosis, breathing difficulties, and aminoglycosides, congenital deafness, ototoxicity. Aminoglycosides are in pregnancy category D. They may cause auditory or vestibular nerve damage. ICA inhibitor, antihypertensive drugs, if used in second and third trimester of pregnancy, can be cause fetal hypotension, renal failure, oligohydramnions, and even death. Sulfamethoxazole, trimiptoprim, neonatal hemolysis, and metahemoglobinemia. Drugs associated with teratogenics, if assume our knowledge, it can be IC inhibitors, alcohol androgens, antithyroid drugs, carbamazepine, valproate drugs, hemotherapeutin, cocaine, warfarin, lithium, phenytoin, streptomycin, tetracycline, thalidomide, trimetadione, and diethylstilbestrol. Drug taken by men, drugs taken threaten semen. It can be finasteride, and riazofulmin may damage sperm cells too. Smoke can have risk on pregnancy as teratogenic too. These risks include miscarriage, placental abruption, placenta previa, premature rupture of membranes, preterm delivery, low birth weight, cleft lip and cleft palate, perinatal mortality, sudden infant death syndrome, and impaired cognitive development. How categorize pregnancy risk? And you see the all risk has category. For example, is controlled human data available? If available, it can be cause positive yes risk or negative. Positive risk can be benefit oversize the risk, and the risk overweighs the benefit. A negative can be category A, B. If animal data available, if control human data available and it's absent data, but if animal available can be differentiated and divided, no, yes, because if yes, it's category B, negative risk. Positive risk can be no human data confirm risk, and category C, no. Category C is data available. Why we're talking about? Because this categorization laid down on basic of categorization, and we will talk about FDA categorization of risk for pregnancy and Swedish pharmaceutical special literature. Risk categories little bit different. Classification, but still it include risk category, FAS criteria and IDS criteria. A risk, according Swedish pharmaceutical special literature, it's drug taken by a larger number of pregnant women without evidence of fatal harm. Same as FASSB. Risk category, human data insufficient and unlimited. Classification is based on animal data by allocation of 3 subgroups. It can be divided B1, B2 and B3. B1 is animal experiments have no provided evidence of an increased incidence fatal damage. B2 animals studied insufficient. B3 studies in animals have found evidence and increased occurrence of fatal damage. The significantly which is uncertain in humans. Drugs that by their pharmacologic effect can cause or must be suspected of cause disturbance in the reproductive process that may involve risk to the fetus without being directly teratogenic. It's we're talking about risk category C, and according RDA's criteria, drugs have caused or may be suspected of causing harmful effects on the human fetus or neonate without causing malformation, and this effect may be reversible. Risk D, animal and human data indicate increased incidence of fetal malformation or other permanent damage in humans. According IDA's category, drugs that have caused and are suspected to have caused or may be expected to cause an increased incidence of human fetal malformation or irreversible damage. And risk category X, drugs that have such a high risk of causing permanent damage to the fetus that they should be not using in pregnancy. Summary: new Food and Drug Administration pregnancy included subsection pregnancy registry, risk summary, clinical consideration, and precisely data. Pregnancy registry. If pregnancy exposure registry is available, the subsection must contain a statement about existence of the registry as well constant information. Risk summary. When use of the drug is contraindicated, it must be started first. Risk statement must be present as following order: based on human data, based on animal data, and based on pharmacology. Human data are available. The risk summary must summarize the specific developmental outcome, its incidence, and the effects of dose, duration of exposure, and gestational timing of exposure. Animal data are available. The labeling must summarize the finding in animals and describe the potential risk of any adverse development outcomes in humans. The species affected, timing, dose, and outcomes must be included. When drug has a well understood mechanism of action that may result in drug association adverse development outcomes, the risk summary must explain the mechanism of action and the potential risk. Clinical consideration required hidden to the extent relevant information is available for disease-associated maternal and on-embryo fatal risk, dose adjustment during pregnancy and postpartum period, maternal adverse reaction, fetal neonatal adverse reaction, and labor or delivery, and precisely data. Human data, the labeling should describe adverse development outcomes, adverse reaction, and other adverse effects, and the type of studies or reports, number of participants, and duration of each study, exposure, information, and limitations of data. Animal data. Labeling should describe the type of studies, animal species, dose, duration, and timing of exposure, presence or absence of maternal toxicity, and limitation of the data. Now we're talking about categorization, classification of risk category according FDA, Food Drug Administration, and we see A, B, C, D, X category. Category A, well-controlled human studies indicated to human. B, animal studies indicate fatal risk, not human, but human studies on animal studies do not indicate fatal risk, and well-controlled human studies are unavailable. Risk category C, well-controlled human studies are lacking and animal studies unavailable or indicate adverse effects to the fetus. D, human studies or investigational or post-marketing data indicate fatal risk. Benefits may be acceptable despite potential risk. Animal-human studies or investigation or post-marketing data indicate a fatal risk clearly outweighs by possible benefit. This classification adapted from Mutiambisi and McCall. And you see another risk category criteria 1, 2 CGS. It's concerning on risk adoption from Schaeffer, and you see same approach, and you can use it too in your daily practice. Lactation risk category it's concerning on using drugs in lactation period, women, mother. L1 Lafes, paracetamol, ibuprofen, epinephrine, lactation risk categories LRC. L2 safer, diclofenac, fentanyl, cetirizine, omeprazole, cephalosporin. L3 moderately safe, carboza, acetylsalicylic acid, indomethacin, codeine, morphine, metazolam, triazolam, acebutolol, dimetindene. L4 pay attention, hazardous, colchicine, lithium, ergobrevin, ergotamine, and contraindicated ACE inhibitors, for example, remember it concerning on antihypertensive ACE inhibitors, for example, enalapril and other drugs of these groups. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention, for your participation, for my webinars and my lectures. I'm planning to make live streams, and I'll be thankful for your comments and for your questions. We will discuss it. You can contact me through Facebook, through by email and LinkedIn, and you can find Galina Cardera. I will leave in first comments my email and my date of LinkedIn, so you can contact me. I'll be thankful if you will find the ability will subscribe my channel, because it will help for new medical doctors, healthcare professional, special pharmaceutical industry, pharmacovigilance, special clinical trials, to get ability to these channels, and it will promote this information, these lectures in YouTube, because without your likes, without your subscribes, it's very difficult to realize right now. Thank you very much. Next lectures will be related drug safety in pregnancy women, drug safety lactation mothers, drug safety in children, and vaccination and pregnancy. Plus, I will continue clinical diagnosis in adverse effects. It can be continue topic cardiotoxicity, drug safety, drug-related anti-arrhythmia. It can be interesting new material, summarize it. I think it will be useful for you. Adverse drug-related disorder of blood. It's divided concerning on according to red blood, white blood cells, and I think it will be important to you and how minimize this risk. Then I will think about medication errors, and I already found and summarize this material, and I think it will be laid down, it become basic of book drug safety, and it can be a book and for medical students and for healthcare professional, medical doctors, and what I want pharmaceutical industries, and I invite you in Congress. It will be World Pharmacovigilance Drug Safety Congress in Amsterdam, 5th October. I will be thankful, and I will be big pleasure talk with you. And event, it's annual pharmacovigilance summit. It can be in Prague, Czech, 14-15 of September. Thank you very much. See you later on my new lectures.